Hello, friends. Let me tell you a true story about Mauro Prosperi, who survived in desert for 9 days. Mauro Prosperi was an Italian. He had been a pentathlete athlete who had retired, and he had been a policeman. But from there also he had retired, and he was leading a normal life, enjoying his life. But as he was an athlete, so when he was around 39 years of age, his one friend told him about a very tough competition, tough running competition, which was in Morocco, and that competitors, the participants, have to run in that competition from one end to other around 250 kilometers in Sahara Desert. So he took it as a challenge, like Mauro liked challenges very much, so he wanted to take part in that competition. So he immediately started his training. He started running for around 40 kilometers daily, and then he started drinking less and less water to, to acclimatize his body to the hot weather of Sahara, so that he could survive on very, very less water. So it was very grueling training. He prepared himself. He thought logically how to take part in that competition. And after that training, finally on 10th of April, that competition was going to start in 1994. So his wife did not want him to take part in the competition because, before taking the part in that competition, the participants had to fill a form, and in that form there was a question that in case of their death, where the competitor, the participant, wanted to send his or her body. So that question had to be answered. It showed that how dangerous that competition was. Means it was so dangerous that the participant could die. So it was compulsory to mention where the body after the death of that competitor had to be sent. So wife was very worried because they had three children below the age of 8. But he assured her that nothing would happen and at most he would be sunburnt. So finally took part in that competition on 10th of April 1994. The competition started, and so there were only 80 competitors that time because it was not that much well known that time. Now around 1300 competitors take part every year, but that time only 80 competitors were there. And the rule was there that the participants had to arrange for their own clothes, their food, sleeping bag, compass, maps, everything. The competition arrangement, the people who are arranging that competitor, the organizers, were only going to provide water for drinking. That's it. Everything else had to be arranged by the participants, from food to clothes to maps to compass to knife, flare, like in case someone was lost. So the flares are used. So those flares also were arranged by the participants. So finally, the race started, and initially it was a smooth sailing for Mauro Prosperi because he was an athlete, and it was the first time he was running in the desert, and he was enjoying the scenery. That was the purpose in taking part. Previously, when he had taken part in the Olympic competition, that time he was intent, he was completely concentrating on winning. So he could not enjoy the scenery. There was no time to pay attention to the scenery because he wanted to just win the race for his country. Now he was able to pay attention to the beautiful surrounding where deserts, vast deserts are there, very few trees are there, and for kilometers and kilometers only sand is there. So he was able to enjoy that scenery. On the fourth day, so which was the toughest part of the race, so suddenly, after running 32 kilometers, suddenly a sandstorm started when he was running from near the dunes, sand dunes. So suddenly that sandstorm started, and the wind was blowing with sand with such force that it almost blinded him. It was very difficult to breathe. Visibility was very low, and the sand was hitting his body with such force that he felt that as if needles were piercing his body. So he wrapped a scarf around his face to save his face and save his skin from that stinging, that very hard hitting sandstones, that sand particles. But he kept moving because he was afraid that if he stayed at one place, he might be buried under the sand. So continuously sand was blowing and hitting him. So he kept moving forward. So after traveling a long, long distance and being hit by the sand particles very hard, so he realized that how dangerous it was. And he was experiencing it for the first time. So finally he found shelter. So he took shelter somewhere where the sand particles could not hit him that hard. And he waited for the sandstorm to abate, intensity to go down. And after 8 hours, finally, the sandstorm ended. But by that time, it was evening. And so he had to lie down, he had to sleep on a sand dune. So he thought that now the competition was almost over for him because he had been on the fourth place before the sandstorm. But now he realized that other competitors must have traveled, must have taken over him. But he thought, okay, then also he had to finish the competition, even though he could not win it. So in the morning he woke up early and again started running. So he thought that he would meet up with some other competitors and then together they would finish the competition. But he did not meet anyone. And after running 4 hours continuously, he climbed a sand dune and then he looked around. Then he realized that he was lost because he could not see any markers for the race. So he got down and he started walking because there was no meaning in running because he knew that he was lost. So what was he going to do by running? So he started walking, and the first thing he did was to take urine. He urinated in one bottle, spare bottle, because he knew that in the desert, so he would not get any water. As a precaution, he did that. And he had only half a bottle filled with water. So he kept drinking that water very slowly and kept walking. So after walking, again he came at night that day to some area where sand dunes were there. He slept again on a sand dune. Again next day he woke up and he kept walking. And finally in the evening that day, so he came to a marabot. Marabot means a structure, a Muslim shrine, a Muslim kind of small tomb, or you can say a small uh, mosque. So there he was hoping that he would find someone, but there was only a saint in a coffin. No one alive was there. And that day, before coming to the marabot, he had seen a helicopter. So helicopter was flying very low. Helicopter had been flying very low. So he sent that flare in the sky, hoping that that helicopter pilot would notice it. But unfortunately, he did not notice it because it was very small flare, size of only a pen. And because of that, from the next year, the organizers of the competition, so they made it compulsory to carry a big normal flare which is used while traveling in the sea, which weighed around half a kilogram. So after that, because of that, he felt depressed, but he knew that the organizers would look for him, they would try to find him, and he would be found. So he came in that marabout, that tomb or that Muslim shrine where he took shelter. At least now there was some roof on his head. So there he took shelter, and the first thing he tried to do was he went on the roof of the marabout and he tried to put his Italian flag so that if someone came looking for him. So if they flew over that marabout, so they would be able to see that flag, Italian flags, and they would realize that he was there in that marabout, in that shrine. So now the problem, actually, he had a lot of food with him, like dehydrated food. Only the problem was water. So he partook, he ate that food slowly to make it last longer. He stayed in that marabout for next 3 to 4 days. And again, he went on the roof, on the terrace of that marabout. There he saw in one corner some bats were huddled. So he took those bats and he cut their heads and he drank the blood of around 20 to 25 bats to survive. Because now in his body, that water was not there. He was getting dehydrated. So, as food, he ate actually bird eggs and lizards, to survive. He was now in survival mode where he could not choose his own food. Whatever food he could get, he had to eat it and get the nutrition and get the hydration, get water. So in the form of blood, by drinking the blood of those bats, he got that hydration, that liquid in his body. And he stayed there for 3 to 4 days. Now he realized that he was going to die. So he decided that rather than dying an agonizing, protracted, long drawn death, so he decided to kill himself. Because he realized that if he died in the open, in the desert, so no one would find his body. In the vast hundreds of kilometers desert, no one would recognize him, no one would find him. So if he died in the marabout, at least when his body would be found, so they would recognize that it was the body of Mauro Prosperi. And there was the rule that time in Italy that unless and until a person was lost for 10 years minimum, that person was not considered dead. So he realized that if he died on the open in the desert, so he would not be considered dead for 10 years. So his wife would not get the benefits. His wife would not get his pension or his, money as he was dying on, so as his property or other money. So for 10 years, she would have to suffer. So if he was found dead in the marabout, if his body was found, so his wife would get his money and property immediately because of that. So he decided to die there. So he decided to kill himself. So he found a charcoal. He wrote message on the wall for his wife that he was there, he was Mauro Prosperi and he was lost, and if his body was found, so she should get his property. So he wrote down everything on the wall and he took a knife and he cut his wrists and he lay down to die. But next morning, he woke up again. He had not died. So he realized that because of not drinking water, not getting any liquid in his body, his blood had thickened so much, it did not flow freely. As soon as he had cut his wrists and blood started flowing little bit, it had clotted. So it did not flow, it did not come out from his wrist, and that was the reason why he had not died. So the very reason which was killing him, dehydration, not having enough water in his blood and his body, had saved his life. Because blood had not flown freely and it had thickened so much, it clotted immediately. So he thought that it was a sign. Then he decided to fight for his life. He decided to fight with death, have competition with death. And he decided to go out of the marabout and find people. So he got out from the marabout. He started walking. And while walking, he adopted a strategy that he traveled only in the early hours of the day when it was relatively cooler, and after the sun had set in the late evenings. He traveled only during these two times. In the afternoon, when sun was extremely hot, unbelievably hot, so he took shelter somewhere under a tree or some ledge of some hill or somewhere where some shade was there. He took shelter there whole day, and only during the early morning or early evening he traveled. And at night he buried his body in sand. He made a hole and he buried his body and covered himself with sand to save himself from extreme cold. Because in Sahara Desert or in any desert, during the day it is extremely hot, but at night it is unbelievably cold. It can kill you. So he saved himself by burying his body in sand and sleeping there. And when he traveled, when he walked, he found snakes, he found beetles, he found lizards. So he killed them and he ate them raw. He ate them raw to get the moisture, you know, the liquid from their bodies. And he ate them raw and he survived on that. So he kept walking. He saw dry bed of rivers. So there he found one one kind of vegetation. It is called succulent. So he mashed it up, mashed the leaves, and he squeezed the liquid, two, three, whatever drops he could squeeze. So in his mouth. And he was so dehydrated, so much dehydrated. He realized that he was losing weight rapidly. The watch he was wearing on his wrist was progressively getting more and more loose, looser and looser. He felt it that hanging. And so that time he was not even able to urinate because there was no water in his body to urinate. He only had some tablets, nutritional tablets. So he took those tablets without water and he kept walking. So finally, by walking like this, by going through all these hardships and plight, and his mouth was completely dry, his throat was aching, it was so dry that he felt that it was swollen. His tongue was swollen, his throat had swollen. So on the 8th day, he came to finally an oasis where he saw some very small pond filled with water. So he lay down on the side of that pond and very, very slowly he drank water. He could not drink water continuously because of his swollen throat. He drank very little by little the water of that pond. So it gave him that moisture, he gave him water, he's hydrated him. And so he lay down there for continuously 8 to 10 hours and he slept there. Next day, he filled 2 of his bottles with water and he continued his journey. Finally, on the 9th day, at great distance, he saw goats. So he realized that he was hopeful that now he was human inhabitants, human habitation. So after walking, he saw a girl. So he started running toward that girl. He was elated, he was euphoric. Finally, he had found someone. But that girl started running away from him in fright. So he realized that he must be a sight after traveling continuously 9 days. So being in sandstorm and not having bath and being in the open, in the sun. So his skin had become black because of the dust and being sunburnt. And his eyes had sunk to such a level that he could not recognize himself when he saw himself in mirror. And his cheeks had sunk so much that he could not recognize himself. So that girl, he traveled in that direction. Then from that one tent, some women came out, an old woman came out, and that kind woman gave him goat milk to drink. And they gave him place to rest outside their house. As only women were there at home, and they were Muslim women, so they did not allow a man to enter their house because their men folk were not at home. They had gone to market, but they gave him shelter and gave him some goat milk and gave him food also, solid food. But he could not eat solid food. He immediately vomited that food. After that, they contacted military police. Military police took him away. They blindfolded him because they thought that he was a spy. And after some time, he realized that actually he had traveled 291 kilometers off course. So he had entered Algeria, one other country, from Morocco. So the military police took him as a spy. They blindfolded him and they took him to the military center and they interrogated him hours and hours. Finally, they came to know that he was the athlete who had been lost in that Des Sables race which he had taken part. In the Des Sables race, he had been lost and he was the same athlete. So they celebrated. They were very happy to have found him. So they celebrated with him. Finally, they admitted him in hospital. And on the 10th day, he was finally able to call his wife and to acquaint her that he was still alive. And the first question he asked her was whether she had buried him. Because after 10 days, how could anyone survive? So he asked her whether she has buried him. So he acquainted her that he was alive, and then he was given liquid, and he was not able to eat any solid food for a long, long time. He was only able to eat and drink soup. So his eyes were damaged a little bit. There was damage to his liver, but fortunately his kidneys were not damaged at all. So after resting there for 2 months, then he returned to Italy. And miraculously, after 4 years, he again took part in that grueling race in Sahara, same Des Sables race. Continuously for next 8 years, he took part in that race because he was just fascinated by the vastness of the deserts, the beauty of the mountains, beauty of the sand dunes, vast expanses without finding a single person, very few trees, and only hills without any trees on them. So he was just enchanted by that scenery. And he was obsessed with returning there again and again. So after 4 years, he returned there. He took part in the same race for continuously next 8 years. And in 2001, he stood 13th in the race. And so he was honored, and when he returned to Italy, he became a celebrity there. TV crews and newspapers conducted his interview, and he wrote a book afterwards on his survival because many people thought that it was almost impossible to survive in desert for 9 days. And when the organizers had realized that he had been lost, so they had started search. And when he had been in that Marabot, one aeroplane had flown from there looking for him. And he had burnt his haversack. Whatever he was there, sleeping bag and haversack and everything, his clothes also, so that there would be that smoke would be created and that pilot would be able to notice that. But unfortunately, that time sandstorm had started and it had lasted for 12 hours. So these were the only 2 times he had been depressed, when the helicopter pilot had not been able to find him and the aeroplane pilot had not been able to see the smoke, and immediately the sandstorm had started. So these were the 2 times only that time he had been felt depressed. Otherwise, he had been able to keep up his spirit. And the time when he had decided to die, so it was not an emotional decision, it was a practical decision. He had realized that rather than dying in a protected death where 8-10 days, 3-4 days without water, he would have to suffer a lot. So he had decided to die, and rather than dying in the open where no one would find his body, so to benefit his family, his children, his wife, he had decided to kill him quickly in the Marabot so that they would get his money. So it was a calculated decision, not an emotional decision. So I hope that you like this true story. So thanks for watching.